All right. Let's see. Live. What's up, guys? Another episode of Full Blast. Doing the things. So I got to thinking at the end of my conversation with V in the last video, which, if you have not checked it out, super good. She fucking breaks down sleep in a really, really interesting and important way. It gave me a lot of insight. Obviously, as somebody who is sleep last, boy, could I always use more insight on the mechanics of sleep. I think she did a really good job of breaking that down. Towards the end of the video, we got to talking about a little bit more broadly, like just sort of like general OP stuff, right? Talking about saviors and demons and balance and functions and the this and the that, right? And one thing that sort of sparked, that I guess I sort of heard for the first time, as it were, because we kept talking about obligation to your saviors, obligation to your saviors, obligation to your saviors. That's the whole foundation of OP, is this obligation to your saviors that, you know, you have to learn to love the demons, learn to love the darkness in your demons, learn to get comfortable being bad at your demons. Which, just as like a mini side note, we may revisit this. Part of getting comfortable with being bad at your demons is finding a safe space to be bad at your demons in, right? So if you're in this environment where you've been rewarded for your saviors, and this is, I think, one of the biggest reasons that beyond the biological savior addiction sort of things, one of the biggest cultural reasons why savior addiction is so tough. God fucking errant curl. Hang on. Gotta get... See, this is what happens. Oh, see, I just fucking made it worse. You know what? You know what? We're leaning into it. We're leaning into it with the errant curl. No, we are not. That looks terrible. There we go. It can have a little poof. A little poof is fine. You just don't like the errant curl. I'm sorry. I smashed you down. I have to be nice to my curls. We're in a rough patch right now. Anyway, that aside, one of... how was I talking about the errant curls? We're talking about obligation to saviors, and the cultural factors, right? So if you are good at your saviors, right, which ostensibly you would be, and you are rewarded for being good at your saviors, and the tribe sees you as being a competent person and expects you to be a competent person, well, now you are in a really tricky spot, because you're like, well, I need to work on my demons. I'm not very good at working on my demons. The tribe expects me to be competent. I expect myself to be competent, right? Again, and actually even leaving aside like the ego stuff, which I guess is sort of tied to tribe, but like if the tribe expects you to fill a role that you're now deciding that you're not gonna fill, that already is like, whoa, man, what are you doing? And now you have the audacity to be bad at this thing that we don't want you to be doing in the first place because you fuck up the entire tribe dynamic. Like, that's a really tough pattern to break, right? So, and again, to be clear, that is just as true for Savior DE as it is for Savior DI. Like, both, regardless of the orientation of your decider, the tribe pressure connection whatever thing is gonna be just as real depending on which way you want to swing, right? If you're like, the tribe expects me to be this outgoing person, I tell the tribe what to do, I want to blast all the time. If I then decide I want to SF consume, that's going to fuck up the dynamic. And conversely, you know, if the tribe is used to you being, I actually saw this a lot. You know, if you're playing the archetype of like ESFP party girl, And then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I don't want to go out. I'm actually going to stay home and like actually do my taxes properly, because I do have a lot of 1099s and I think I actually can write off a lot more than I have been before. And I'm going to get very OI about it. That's going to fuck up the tribe dynamic too. Like, so it doesn't matter. And regardless, you are going to feel this tribe and self pull, regardless of your sort of natural orientation. But again, we started talking, V and I, about this like this obligation thing and playing the obligation game, and like that's what really clicked for me. Is what I sort of heard the first time, is that it's not. Yes, obligation to your saviors is the problem, right? Is the overarching whatever problem, right? But I think that we focus overly much on the savior component rather than the obligation component. And that's what I want to talk about today. Because look, it is probably easier to feel obligated to your saviors. And so that may be an easier inroad to start to break down the obligation game in general. But I think that, we were talking in that other video about like nodes and edges and like what is the foundation of all of this. The absolute biggest thing that I have felt for myself during this pandemic, this lockdown, the quarantine, can't fucking do anything, is that the sense of obligation in general is just completely fucking dissolved. Just nothing. Now, in my case, I felt it super acutely as somebody who is doubling up in a savior state on his DE. It was very much like the outside world telling me, like, all of that noise quieted down in a really important way. But I also know a lot of DIs who are like, wait a minute. I had built my identity around these things that worked for me, these things that I liked. And they're like, wait, do I have to stick to those? Like, I know that I built my identity around, I'm the kind of person who goes to the gym every day and I run 5 miles a day and fucking whatever. And being able to break that down and go, wait a minute, the obligation to myself, that was a dumb obligation. I don't actually like these things and I'm burning myself out and it's not sustainable for me. Oh shit, I can use this opportunity to try new shit. That also has happened, right? So just this concept of obligation, I think, is coming under scrutiny culturally right now. And I think it makes a lot of sense in the context of OP. Because the whole reason why we double down on our saviors most often is out of a sense of obligation. However that manifests, can manifest in a million fucking different ways. But the problem is the sense of obligation. And that, to me, is where the stress comes in. It's the, I have to get this done. Right? And I think that is where the game part of the obligation game comes in. If you really want to break it down even further than that, it's breaking out of this mindset of completion. It's this like, I have to get 17 things done every day, and there's just this never-ending pile of shit that I have to complete. When you're in that kind of a mindset, it is astronomically easier to default to your saviors. Once you break out of the obligation game, using your demons is like it's a cakewalk. You're like, oh, fuck yeah, I can do my demons. I don't got to do a goddamn thing. It's amazing. It's amazing. For instance, again, obviously I'm speaking heavily from my NT blaster with demon consume, but the analogy maps onto all of the other, like, don't get too caught up in the sensory of what I am saying, because the analogy maps on to everything. You know, I was very, very reluctant to do SF consuming. And actually, one of the biggest reasons that I came to LA was to put myself in an environment where I would be encouraged to do SF consume, right? Because I knew it was like, all right, this is going to be a challenge to do it regardless. So let me give myself the best possible environment in which to do this thing that I know is really, really healthy for me. I mean, this is a very, very extreme example, but again, the analogy holds. If you're like, oh my God, I'm an alcoholic, I need to quit drinking, maybe think about not working at a bar anymore, right? Yes, there are plenty of sober bartenders. There was an entire fucking sitcom, Cheers, based on the premise of sober bartender. Cool. But man, is that gonna make your life way harder than it has to be, right? If you're like, I want to quit doing this thing that I'm addicted to, let me also be cognizant of the environmental signals I'm getting surrounding that thing, right? And it's a similar idea. I was like, you know what? New York has rewarded me too much for this NTST play thing. If I'm going to break out of this habit and actually work on my SF consume and bring it around to my NF sleep, New York is not going to reward me for that based on the patterns I have built here, the friends that I had, the things I would have to, like, it would be too much. And I would fall back into my old ST play patterns because I just would. And so a big part of me coming out here is I was like, I know that I'm bad at SF, so let me at least go somewhere where being bad at SF is not going to be turbo punished. And I have seen that routinely here. My sort of joke when I moved to LA was I am pretending that I am a 19-year-old girl who dropped out of college after a semester and moved to LA to find fame and fortune. Like, that is my narrative. And it's a really important narrative for me because it gives me this sense of freedom. And it breaks me out of the obligation game. And I think it's one of the things that I, could do. Like, again, as I work on this more and as I'm like, if I find myself stuck, something that I think can be very, very useful is just writing down the things that you know that you feel an obligation towards. And by obligation, the way that I'm defining that is, to me, obligation is this feeling of, if I don't do it, then it'll never get done. Okay, let's unpack that feeling. Step one, this idea of it'll never get done, you just got to get rid of that. The idea of doneness is a false one. We're not baking cookies. That's not how this works. This is a completely different process, right? There are going to be smaller achievable tasks within a larger unending thing that we're chipping away at. So yes, when it comes to daily tasks, absolutely love it. Those are great things to look for. How can I be done with this? Like, what are these little boxes that I can check off? Great. But so just to sort of, I'm now that I'm starting to understand this obligation game a little more, I'm starting to see the value in Dave and Shan's, like when they talk about like their home and how they organize their home for things. I think a lot of it makes a lot of sense, because what it reinforces is this idea of laundry is never done. You never have all clean clothes. That's just not how it works. You're almost never going to have an entire pantry of clean dishes. Maybe you will if you got a little extra energy and you have the energy to rinse off the plates and put them in there and put the little packet in and start it. Great. Oh my God. If you have a pocket of energy and 20 minutes, fucking use that energy, man. Like, oh man, that's amazing. But the goal is not, I grew up in a household where at the end of every night, before we watched TV, before we played video, before we did anything, all of the things in the house had to be done. They had to be done. All of the dishes had to be done, right? All of the napkins had to be put in the dirty clothes. If it was laundry time, we had to bring down our laundry. No watching TV until the homework is done, right? That was how I grew up. And that was very, very useful in some respects because it certainly taught me a lot of discipline. And it gave me a lot of structure within which to thrive. And like, me, IJ Box, love me some structure. But I think it can be very damaging when we start to treat tasks and processes that don't have an end as feeling the sense of obligation for completion. So to give a very concrete example, in my cohort, this was back in, I guess it would have been 2012, 2013, was when this really started. And then that tracks. Sorry, I had to get the masculine sensory on this. When the legalizing gay marriage in America was starting to make its way up the local courts, up to the Supreme Court, right? This was like in 2012, 2013. And one thing that a lot of the people in my cohort, again, a lot of musical theater people, 90% gay men, obviously an issue that is very near and dear to the community at large, and particularly a lot of my friends, was this idea of they set their middle name on social media to equality. And the idea was they're not going to take away that middle name until gay marriage gets passed. All right. You know what? I'm good with that. I think that's great. If you want to use your social media profile to promote social justice issues, I think that's fantastic. That's great. I have absolutely no problem with this. And for a lot of those people, one of two things happened. Either they're like, we gotta legalize gay marriage. We gotta legalize gay marriage. We gotta work tirelessly to legalize gay marriage. We will not be marginalized, et cetera, et cetera. And then 2015 rolls around. Obergefell versus Hodges. The Supreme Court rules in favor, I believe, in favor of Obergefell. Is that? Yes, I believe so. Yes, Obergefell was yes is the side that the Supreme Court sided on, and it was the weekend of gay pride. It was fucking amazing, especially in New York. Oh my god, it was great. And then those people took equality out of their Facebook name, and then just stopped being activists. They just like, oh yeah, I got the thing that I wanted out of this activism game, and now I'm out. Cool. Okay, well, like, that would be fine if they hadn't been calling themselves, if they hadn't been like saying that they cared about all of the other things in the activism world, right? Feminism, racial inequality, like all these other things that are part of the social justice lattice, right? And they're like, nope, I got, the thing that I cared about, equality has been reached. I got what I wanted. Me and my friends got what we wanted. Great, I don't need to do anything ever again. And they just left. That's one thing that can happen. The other thing that can happen is they did it, and then there was this weird thing. It was like they feel bad about taking it away because they're like, but there's so much more work to do. Oh my God, should I even leave it? But that's also a constant reminder of all the work that I have to keep doing, and it's never going to get done. And then they just go fucking nuts. And it's to be perfectly honest, it's a lot of the people that I unfollowed on Facebook because I'm like, I can't with the constant agita. I can't do it. I can't have that in my sphere 100% of the time. Not happening. And I think that in both of those instances, it's because, either the total bury your head in the sand about other things that are wrong in the world and the complete fixation on all of the things that are wrong in the world. All of that is because those people were playing the obligation game, and it manifested as a savior addiction. But I think at the root of it, it is playing the obligation game. And the only way that they knew how to play the obligation game the best, or to win the obligation game, is by continuing to double down on their saviors. And the activists that I know that are approaching this in a healthy way, and there are some, not as many as I'd like, but there are some, they're the ones who are like, you know what? Yes, the issue of voter suppression, that is not going to vanish tomorrow. No amount of effort in the short term is going to fix this systemic problem permanently. We got to work hard to try to, win the election, whatever. But like, we are playing the long chip away game because the voter suppression, that is folded into the school to prison pipeline. That's folded into defunding the police. That's folded into restricting access to X, Y, and Z. Like, there are so many facets to this big systemic problem that is just going to continue to morph and evolve as like we will make some progress, and then people in power will find another way to fuck people over, and then we make some progress. Like, that's just how activism works. That is how activism has always worked. It is an ebb and flow. It is not, well, if we just fix this, and this, then everything will be done. It's not how it works. And I've seen a lot of people just fucking lose their minds playing the obligation game. They're not, whether they're playing the TESI game, whether they're playing the FENE game, doesn't fucking matter. The FINI obligate, right? It doesn't matter. It is, they're playing the obligation game. And if you can break out of the obligation game, now you got freedom. I don't care what your saviors are. I don't care what your demons are. That's where the freedom comes. So we're going to go back to the Matrix because God, do we love the Matrix. And we're going to do a little Humanities 101. We're going to be talking about Plato in the Cave. Talking about Plato in the Cave. You can't talk about the Matrix without understanding Plato's allegory of the cave. The basic version of the allegory of the cave is that you got all these dudes and they're lined up, women too, men and women. It's not a guy-girl thing. Everyone. Here to everyone. They are lined up and they're facing this wall, and then the little demons are behind with torches, and they're putting on a shadow puppet play being projected onto the wall. And the people watching think that that is reality because that is what they are seeing. And then one day, this one guy is like, that feels fake. That feels fake. I'm just going to get up out of my binding and then walk out. And he turns around and he's like, wait, there are dudes doing fucking shadow puppets. That's not... What? And then he leaves the cave. He's like, motherfuckers, there is an entire goddamn world outside of this cave. Are you kidding me? So then he runs back in. And this is the part with the allegory of the cave that tends to get missed, right? People stop at various points up to that point. To me, the key of the allegory of the cave, this dude runs back in and is like, y'all, did you know that not only are there dudes doing shadow puppets, not only is there an entire world out there, but these pillories that we're in, they don't have locks on them. You can literally get up and just leave. Like, you don't actually have to stay here. It's like there is a great picture of it's a horse tied to a little plastic chair. And the horse is just standing there. Now, this may be Photoshopped. I don't know. But you get the idea, right? And it's this idea of the horse could run away at any time. The horse can overpower the chair very easily. But the horse is like, no, I'm tied to this chair. I can't go anywhere because the chair is keeping me here. What? No, you can just leave. And he's like, no, but like I'm tied to the chair. Like, and if I were to leave, like the chair has to come with me. And you're like, yeah, okay, we'll deal with that later. You can just, okay, right now, this is never ending story time and you are stuck in the bubbling muck and you are sinking and you're tied to a chair that you can very easily overpower because it's made of fucking plastic. No, get out, dude. Nah, I'm good. I'm going to chill with this chair. And you're like, well, shit. And that to me is the obligation game, is that when we talk about things aren't real. Yes. Okay. I don't mean like the glass is an illusion, man. Like if I just willed myself to be able to move my hand through glass, then like I could, but I just haven't reached that plane of consciousness yet. Like that's not what I'm talking about. Like in the sensory world, the glass is real, right? The water is real. The lemon juice I put in there is real in the sense that it exists in the physical world. Nobody is debating this. But when we say that's not real, it's my obligation to that is not real. I have decided that I have an obligation to continue to live in New York City, to continue to keep drinking, to continue to foster toxic relationships, to continue to let to continue to try to not call people out when they bring their. I just deleted a comment from my personal Facebook page because I posted this really nice, lovely thing, and this woman comes in and like spews some toxic bullshit, and I literally just deleted it. And if this person writes me as like, "Hey, why'd you delete my comment?" I'm probably going to say something along the lines of, "It was inappropriate, uncalled for, unhelpful, and I don't like you." Like, it's going to be something like that. And then she's, this is me winning the shower argument, so just like indulge me for a second. And then she'll be like, "Well, blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, what you did was unacceptable, considering you never comment on anything else except now you decide to be a bitch about it. Like, no, fuck you, go away. And if that's a problem for you, then we can just not be friends." Right? I remember this so clearly, and it was like this intense sense of freedom. So I filmed like a 3-episode thing for a TV show. This was back in 2017, and I filmed I just filmed the first episode. Yeah, no, it couldn't have been the third. It was after the third episode. That's what. So the second or the third. Which one was it? Maybe it was the second. Yeah, because the second, it was at the end of the day. It was either the second or the third one. And I was like, I love this work. I feel good about the work I'm doing, et cetera, et cetera. Awesome. And I just remember, yeah, it had to have been, because that's when I quit musical theater. I remember that I had a phone call with my agent. Yeah, it was after the second one. Phone call with my agent, and it was, I had gotten this offer to like go out of town for a week, and it was, the way it works is it was 29 hours of rehearsal for $100, which is a very, very common contract, which is fine. But I would have to go out of the city, and I'd have to miss a week of actual paying work to do it. And I had just taken a couple of days off. I had previously told my boss that I was like, "Listen, if I leave, it's going to be something for really, really important, whatever." And I ended up going back and forth with my agent at the time. And she was like, "Okay, they're really not happy with you saying no to this." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I'm saying no to it." And she's like, "Okay, well, let me be more clear. They're getting mad at me for not making you do this." And I was like, "Listen, I'm gonna be really honest. I think this is just what I want to do. Like, I think I don't want to do the musical theater thing anymore. Like, let me think about it a little bit, but this has been growing for a while, and I think I need to make a change." And she was basically like, "Okay, well, if that is true, then I don't know what that means for our future, if you understand what I mean." She wasn't threatening at all. She was just saying, like, if you don't want to do musical theater anymore, I'm predominantly a musical theater agent. I don't know that we should be working together anymore. Right? Is basically what she was saying. And I was like, "Totally understand. You do what you got to do." And I fucking called her bluff. She was like, "Oh, okay. Well then, let's see if we can make it work." And it ended up going well and whatever. And then I left for other reasons, whatever. But the point is, the reason I was able to make that change in my life is not because I decided to stop playing the musical theater game. That had nothing to do with it. Is that I stopped playing the obligation game. And I was like, holy fuck, I can actually do whatever I want. Okay. I gotta do what's sustainable for me, what's best for me, like what I want to do. And I know once I stopped feeling obligated to the musical theater game, I could do whatever the fuck I wanted. And then slowly, all the changes I ended up making in life were a result of me breaking the obligation and then deciding, do I want to continue this or not? And I had to break that obligation first before reinforcing it so that I could actually reinforce it in a way that was meaningful and mattered, right? In that sort of, V and I talked in the other video about like little DI nodes being connected by OI. I needed a new OI to connect these things that I like. Like, do I like this? Is there a connection here? Okay, there is. So let's remake the connection into something that's really sustainable, that isn't a sense of obligation. It's a sense of mutual benefit. It's a sense of, I love this so much, I'll do whatever it takes to make it work. It's fucking whatever, right? And here's what's really scary, and I think certainly why it took me a long time to make a lot of changes in my life, why I see a lot of people end up not making changes, is because subconsciously they understand, oh, I've been doing this out of a sense of obligation. I don't actually like this. This no longer serves me, but I feel obligated to it. This is where the savior addiction comes in, where it's like, I got into this because of my saviors. So let me double down on those to try to make it work. And that just accelerates the burnout, accelerates the tidal wave, whatever, right? So all of this is to say, and I spoke about this in the last video, but like what the actual problem at the root of everything was my sense of obligation to living in New York. Because I had decided when I was 15 years old that I was going to live in New York for my whole life. I had family who lived in New York. I love New York. I visited New York a bunch. I considered myself an honorary New Yorker. Like, I love Woody Allen movies, whatever. And Mel Brooks. Like, I felt very New Yorker. And that was the promise I had made to myself. At age 15, the wrong fucking age to make those kinds of decisions. Even though at various points in my life, I had the opportunity to move to LA. But I had this obligation. It's like, no. I'm committed to this life. I did the thing. I was a made guy. I burned the picture of the Pope, right? Like, I was doing the thing. And so I stuck with it way longer than it served me, purely out of a sense of obligation. And I think it's really important to understand that obligation is invented. Obligation isn't real. That's the thing that isn't real. Because I don't even know that it's necessarily fair to say that, like, the game isn't real. Because, okay, yes, the rules are artificial. But within the context of the game, there is like an in-game economy, whether it's the in-game economy for a video game, or social standing within your group of friends, or it's withholding sex in a relationship, like whatever it is, like those dynamics in that currency, in that economy, in that status is real within the context of that game. Sure. But the obligation to playing that game, that's fake, right? And it's been so great. I have just loved the content Shannon's been putting out lately. She has been fucking killing it, and I gotta just keep saying that because it's important to kind of, it is very much Dave and Shan. It's not Dave with Shan trailing behind. Like, they are very, very equal in this endeavor. And I think it's important that we recognize both of their contributions equally. And she has been fucking killing it lately. And I love hearing her talk about being a mom. And like, you really are seeing her reflecting on being a mom and the growth that being a mom has impacted her. And I love hearing how she talks about, like, when I was, before I was just running around chasing after Cody, this like exceptionally extroverted, rambunctious kid skipping around with his double masculine sensory, like, and she was exhausted. And what ended up, from what I gather, what actually broke that pattern was this, wait a minute, I don't have to chase my kid around. I don't have to chase my kid around all day. Like, I just don't. Now, in order to ensure his well-being, to be the kind of mom that she wants to be, who takes care of her kid, she has to do other things to ensure his safety, right? She has to set rules and boundaries and tell him what to do. And like, again, in this case, use her demons. Whatever. Great. Fine. But what let her access her demons in the first place was breaking the cycle of obligation of, well, I have to do this, and I have to do it in this way. No, you don't. You just don't. You may want to. You may find it beneficial at times, but you don't have to. And I'm going to end on another anecdote story that I think is, the more I think about it, I just think it's so powerful. One of my favorite episodes of Queer Eye is in it's either season 3 or season 4. I can't remember which. But the episode is called Lost Boy. And it's about this guy who works as a camp counselor at a summer camp. And so during the summer, his kid comes to stay with him, but his kid lives with his mom the other 9 weeks out of the year, right? So he really only has these summers to spend time with his kid. And again, Karamo being Karamo, like, they go really deep and they talk about the feelings and the this and the that. And actually, Anthony talks to him about this too, because Anthony is secretly also just as much of a Karamo as Karamo. And actually, now that I think about it, it really was Anthony that got him to open up about this. That, this guy left his family because he had some substance abuse issues. Detroit was not a healthy place for him. And so he left to be a full-time camp counselor. Like, that's a wild and radical departure. But ultimately, the reason that he did it is he's like, look, I need you to understand that I didn't leave Michigan because I didn't love you. It's that I was running out of options, and I needed to be a good role model for you. That was my North Star. He didn't use these exact words, but I'm trying to sort of, layer in some of the OP wording lately. He was like, listen, my North Star is being a good dad. That is all that I care about. And I couldn't be the kind of dad that I needed to be for you living in Michigan. I couldn't do it. I needed to live, not only did I need to live my best life, my truest life, I needed to be able to provide for you. I needed to be able to help give you the kind of life that you needed to have. And unfortunately, me being in Michigan wasn't going to do that. And also, and again, I don't think he said this, I think one of the other guys said it, but like, it's more important that this kid sees happy dad than it is to see sad dad who is there. that's ultimately a better role model. That's a really tough decision to make, but I think it's so powerful, and I think the guy did the right thing. After the divorce from his ex-wife. And so I think about that kind of obligation. He's like, look, I have a kid here in Michigan. My ex-wife is here, but I am not I am getting into a place where I'm being actively destructive, not only to myself, but to the people around me. I need to make a change for me first so that I can be the best version of myself. And that will have the kind of ripple effect, I think that we're all hoping for in life. So I encourage you to think about, before even getting to saviors and demons. I'm going to fuck about saviors and demons. I don't care. I don't even really care about functions. I think that all of that stuff will work itself out once you start to recognize the versions of the obligation game that you are playing, whether it is obligation to a former identity, an obligation to a city that you live in, an obligation to a relationship, like an interpersonal relationship, obligation to a job, obligation to an apartment. My God, the number of people who get so stuck in New York because they're like, yeah, I lucked into this apartment. This is my story. I lucked into an apartment that was very, very, very affordable. And I ended up staying there way longer than it actually served me. Because I was like, A, it's just fucking hard to move in New York. But also I was like, I have this place. The rent isn't going up. I can afford these things. I'm just going to not do anything because I feel a sense of obligation to this apartment, whatever it may be. The root of all these problems is the obligation game, which manifests more often than not as savior addiction. So whether if you're like, I recognize my saviors and I'm going to use that as an inroad to shake up the obligation game and to sort of break those obligation habits, or if you want to start directly with the obligation habits and then recognize those, then use the savior demon stuff as a way to break it down more effectively, either way works. But it's important to understand that savior obligation very much has two parts. And if we just think of it as, well, I'm just going to not use my saviors, I'm just going to consume, then that's, again, in my case, I'm a lead blaster, so I have demon consume. That's going to be really tough, right? To just say like, oh, I'm just going to do it. Well, okay, how? Because you're still playing the obligation game in all of these parts of your life. And once I started to break out of the obligation game, or rather the world fucking collapsed and the obligation game went away for me, I was like, oh shit, I can fill in these nodes with whatever I want. Great, cool. I am no longer obligated to the things I felt obligated to. Cool. I just get to make new shit. And I'm being really cognizant of not folding in obligation to these connections that I am making, and to let the connections build organically, and to not think about, well, I sunk all of this money or time or resources into this thing, so therefore I just can't do anything, right? Like I'm stuck. I'm pot committed. No such thing as pot committed. Fake. That's fake. That's fake. Pot committed is fake. If over time you reinforce these relationships, boundaries, meaningful experience, whatever it is, yeah, now this is a real foundation. This is something really solid, because it can evolve. Now it can evolve. Now it can shift with you, right? It's still strong, but now it's malleable. So it really comes down to breaking out of the obligation game just as much as breaking out of the savior addiction game. They are very much not even two sides of the same coin. Like they are, in my mind, they are just different words for the same phenomenon. So whatever way helps you understand it best and start to break that down best, that's what I'm going to encourage that you use and think about as you move forward and as you continue on your journey of personal growth. All right, that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye!